This was a history-making day here at federal court. As you said, Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson both convicted of the racketeering and the extortion charges, the most serious charges in this case. The jury was hung on whether or not Bernard Kilpatrick was part of that Kilpatrick enterprise. And Ferguson and Kilpatrick are already in federal custody. Inside the courtroom, Detroit's former mayor and his friend Bobby Ferguson listened as the jury read charge after charge of guilty convictions for the two men. Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson both guilty of the racketeering count. The jury sending a clear message that they ran a criminal enterprise out of City Hall. Both men were convicted of several extortion charges related to city water department contracts, as well as a bribery charge for a $75,000 payment Ferguson made to the Kilpatrick Civic Fund. The former mayor was also convicted of several mail and wire fraud charges, as well as all 6 tax charges. Kilpatrick said nothing as he left federal court after the verdict.
He's pensive. He's, under the circumstances, he's doing as good as he can.
I was surprised by the verdict. I thought for sure that we had established reasonable doubt on the RICO counts and the other substantive counts of bribery and extortion.
Again, the jury was hung on whether or not Bernard Kilpatrick was part of the Kilpatrick enterprise on that RICO charge, and the U.S. attorney has announced that she will not be retrying him on that count. That means Bernard Kilpatrick, who was facing 4 different charges, some of them with penalties up to 20 years, is now only convicted of 1 tax crime with a penalty of up to 3 years. So even though his attorney told me today that, of course, Bernard Kilpatrick is just absolutely devastated about what has happened to his son, in a way, it was a bit of a victory for Bernard Kilpatrick and his legal team today. Now, just to walk everybody back through in case you weren't with us all day, after the verdict was read, the defendants were allowed to leave the court, but then they came back in for another hearing up on the 8th floor up there. That's where the judge decided to remand them back into federal custody, and it was during that hearing that Kwame Kilpatrick finally showed the emotion he obviously wasn't showing for the duration of this trial. He just looked sick. He kept covering his eyes, covering his ears. Just the emotion of where his life is now headed obviously was hitting him. He looked absolutely devastated. Our reporters in the courtroom say they'd never seen him like that before, ever. He's now facing potentially decades behind bars. Reporting live at the federal courthouse in downtown Detroit, I'm Heather Catallo, 7 Action News. Joanne, back to you.
And Heather, I understood at one point he and his father hugged each other for a good minute or a minute and a half, and just sobbing you heard, which I believe was Bernard Kilpatrick and his emotions.
That's right. That's what we understand. I mean, just an emotional day for this family. And regardless of how you feel about the defendants or about this case, obviously these are human beings, and this is obviously a devastating day for them, but a huge, huge victory for the prosecution.
Well, it sure is, Heather. And, you know, even the jurors said that they don't feel bad for the defendants. They knew what they were doing, but they do hurt for the families. Heather, thank you very much. This afternoon, the U.S. attorney took a victory lap of sorts. Action News investigator Ross Jones was at that press conference. And Ross, what did the U.S. attorney have to say and her team tonight?
Well, Joanne, you remember a few years ago, Kwame Kilpatrick promised us all a comeback of sorts. Today, a jury said they had other plans for the ex-mayor, and U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid today thanked that jury for their hard work today and her team that helped deliver today's knockout blow.
This case was hard. It was difficult, but it was necessary. And the men and women that you see standing before you here today have given up countless nights and weekends and holidays with their families to work on this case.
Surrounded by the team that brought the ex-mayor to justice, U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid announced an end to the high-profile, high-stakes case of the United States versus Kwame Kilpatrick.
In contrast to Kwame Kilpatrick, this is real public service, and I am deeply proud of their work.
Admitting that she was at times nervous as the jury deliberated, McQuaid also said her office had no doubt about this. Kilpatrick, his friend Bobby Ferguson, and Father Bernard looted the city of Detroit.
The former mayor was not focused on running the city. He was focused on using the mayor's office as a money-making machine for himself and his family and friends. He was grabbing money from the citizens that he was elected to serve.
And the troubles, we learned, are not quite yet over for Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson. They will likely face civil charges from the IRS, which means civil penalties, as a result of these tax charges they have now been found guilty of. Reporting live downtown, I'm Ross Jones, 7 Action News. Jeff?
Okay, Ross, good job. Thank you very much. Well, just after that verdict, the jurors spoke to reporters. Again, cameras were not allowed inside. Jim Kirchner was in court, however. Jim, did they waver at all on their decision?